Hello, Internet. Welcome to Quiz and Hers. My name is Justin, here with my life partner in crime, Hallie.
Hi.
And this is the new trivia-based podcast where we test each other's knowledge and the strength of our relationship in a 10-week battle for trivia supremacy. Here are the rules of the game. Each week, one of us will be the quizmaster or quiz mistress.
Thank you.
The quizmaster will write 6 questions. They will come from each of the following categories: arts and literature, geography, history, science, sports and games, and sounds and screen. That's music, movies, and TV for those of you playing at home. Each game will also be linked together by one overarching theme. Keep in mind that the quizzee each week has no idea what the questions or the theme will be. Each correct answer is worth 1 point. Whichever one of us has accumulated the most points at the end of 10 weeks, that's 5 games apiece, wins a fabulous prize, which is, I don't know, they don't have to do the dishes for a while, probably.
That sounds nice.
Anyway, we encourage you to play along at home and stick around after each question because the quizmaster will prepare a quick discussion to give a bit more information about the question. So even if you get a question right, stay around and maybe you'll learn something you didn't know before.
That's the hope.
Yes, well, we're certainly learning things, aren't we?
Trying.
Now, one last disclaimer. If you haven't figured this out, this is not going to be a podcast for children. The questions will be too hard, and the language will be too mature, particularly when I get questions wrong. So if you're driving and you have the kids in the car, maybe pause until you've dropped them off at school, okay? Last warning. All right, let's get this shit show on the road. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, then let's play Quiz and Hers. I am the quizmaster this week, and Hallie, submitted for your approval, I call today's game the Twilight Reel.
Ooh.
Because all 6 questions will have to do, in one way or another, with Rod Serling's classic science fiction anthology series, The Twilight Zone. Yes.
Nice.
Which, in my view, is simply put one of the greatest television shows ever produced, full stop.
And I was just talking about this yesterday.
Yes, you were.
The To Serve Man episode.
That episode does not come up in any of these questions.
Ugh.
Unfortunately.
Damn. Okay.
All right. Question 1. We begin our journey into the Twilight Zone, naturally, with a sounds and screen question. What 1960s science fiction anthology TV series opened with an iconic voiceover narration and featured numerous episodes written by its creator, which often ended with a plot twist? The answer is not The Twilight Zone, but this show, known for episodes like Demon with a Glass Hand and the Zanty Misfits, is often compared favorably to that more famous series.
Well, I have no idea.
Do you want to take a guess?
I don't know any other science fiction anthology series except Black Mirror and Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams, but those are both very recent.
Both
so
far too current, yes.
Not helpful. Another 1960s sci-fi anthology.
The listeners can't see that face you're making.
I don't know. I knew I was going to be worse. I'm not winning this prize, am I? I don't know.
Are you going to pass?
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer is The Outer Limits.
I've never heard of that.
Well, you're about to learn about it.
Okay, good.
The Outer Limits debuted on ABC in 1963, 4 years after the premiere of The Twilight Zone. It ran for 2 seasons and a total of 49 episodes. Being a science fiction anthology series in the 1960s, it naturally drew comparisons to The Twilight Zone, both at that time and today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some general factoids about the show, but I'm mostly going to talk about how the 2 shows compare to each other, because there's a bunch of interesting parallels between them.
Were they on at the same time?
They overlapped for a couple years, yes.
Interesting.
So an unaired pilot called the series Please Stand By, which is a title that was rejected by ABC. The pilot was altered slightly and aired under the new title, The Outer Limits. The series was known for its moody, noirish cinematography and earned an extraordinarily loyal, if small, fan base. Horror master Stephen King is an Outer Limits fan. He once called it, quote, the best program of its type ever to run on network TV. Take that, Rod Serling.
Damn.
I know, right?
That's harsh.
Indeed. And now to the odd parallels with The Twilight Zone. Outer Limits creator Leslie Stevens wrote more episodes for his show than any other writer, just like Rod Serling wrote more episodes of The Twilight Zone than anyone else. In addition, both shows had episodes contributed by prominent science fiction authors of the era. Harlan Ellison, noted for short stories like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and Repent Harlequin, Said the TikTok Man, wrote 2 episodes for The Outer Limits, entitled Demon with a Glass Hand and Soldier. Ray Bradbury, the author of Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, and about 100 other science fiction stories and novels, also wrote the Twilight Zone episode I Sing the Body Electric, which he later reworked into a short story. Both shows also opened each episode with voiceover narration. The Twilight Zone, of course, started with Rod Serling's eerie, "You're traveling to another dimension" monologue.
Yeah.
The Outer Limits began with a voiceover played over an image of an oscilloscope narrated by the control voice, which informed viewers that we are controlling transmission. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
What's an oscilloscope?
An oscilloscope?
Yeah.
It's that weird, like, sine wavy thing.
Oh, okay. I was picturing like some fancy machine with a person standing.
No,
next
it was
to
just like a black and white, like, sinusoid wave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. When did the Twilight Zone start with? Was it the same thing every time, or it was just a voice?
It differed by season,
okay.
but it was like the eyeballs and like the floating doors and the stars and all that.
Oh yeah, the stars one, I remember.
There were also notable differences between the 2 shows. The Outer Limits focused more on pure science fiction, whereas the Twilight Zone incorporated more fantasy and supernatural elements. The Twilight Zone also often metaphorically addressed social issues, whereas the Outer Limits was more of just a straightforward action suspense kind of show. The enduring connection between the 2 anthology series is perhaps best summarized in the book The Outer Limits, The Official Companion, which ruefully notes that many fans erroneously remember several Outer Limits episodes as having been episodes of the Twilight Zone.
Of course.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, Stephen King shut down Twilight Zone, so you know, they're even, I guess.
Yeah. All right, question 2. This is a science question. One of the most memorable episodes of Season 1 of The Twilight Zone, Time Enough at Last, features Mr. Henry Bemis surviving nuclear annihilation. Mr. Bemis emerges from the bank vault that sheltered him from the blast mere hours after Armageddon, seemingly forgetting about the dangers of what material, a term for radioactive dust and ash left behind in the atmosphere after a nuclear blast.
I want to say soot, but I know that's wrong.
Okay.
Okay. It's a bad start. Fallout. Nuclear fallout.
Correct.
Yay!
Nuclear fallout refers to the...
I'm not clapping for myself or anything.
You are. I heard you. The listeners heard you. We all know you're clapping for yourself.
It's fine.
So 1 point
50%.
out of a possible 2 thus far, yes.
I'll take it.
Nuclear fallout refers to the residual radioactive material that is launched into the atmosphere after a nuclear explosion. In particular, it refers to irradiated dust and ash that falls out of the sky long after the blast, hence the term. Fallout is very dangerous, and radiation exposure poses both short-term and long-term health risks. The primary risks come from exposure to gamma rays, and the business of building fallout shelters boomed during the Cold War amidst fears of a nuclear attack. Would Henry Bemis's bank vault have shielded him from gamma radiation? I'm not sure, but exiting it and wandering around the bombed-out hellscape a few hours after the end of civilization probably wasn't the smartest decision he ever made.
He's probably not going to have that much time, realistically.
Right, agreed. Time enough at last.
Which was the whole point of the episode.
Yes, time enough at last until the fallout gets you.
Yeah, really.
Ugh. That's the gist of it. So I've just prepared some factoids about Fallout that I think are sort of interesting and fun. There's not a whole lot else to say about what it is. Since the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the later nuclear tests conducted during the Cold War, Earth's entire atmosphere has been contaminated with low levels of nuclear fallout. This so-called global fallout is largely harmless, unlike the more concentrated local fallout at the site of a nuclear blast. But global fallout has had an odd impact on the market for steel. Steel production involves forcing atmospheric gas into unrefined metal, so all steel produced since 1945 is contaminated with small amounts of radioactive material. Pre-war steel has become a rare and valuable commodity in the construction of things like Geiger counters that need to be highly sensitive to radiation. A Geiger counter made of post-war steel wouldn't work properly because it would be a little bit radioactive itself.
Huh. That's
cool?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, this is steel produced everywhere?
Everywhere in the world.
Wow.
The whole atmosphere is contaminated with low levels of global fallout.
Interesting.
And it's mostly harmless at that level, but it messes up Geiger counters.
That's neat.
Speaking of nuclear testing, Bikini Atoll. A set of 23 tiny islands surrounding a lagoon, Bikini Atoll belongs to the Republic of the Marshall Islands, an island nation northeast of Australia. The United States asked the 167 inhabitants of the atoll to, quote, voluntarily and temporarily, end quote, relocate in 1946 so that the area could be used for nuclear testing. They did, and the U.S. subsequently tested 23 separate nuclear weapons on Bikini.
Are there other atolls?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious.
7 decades after the people were relocated, the atoll is still uninhabitable, mainly due to fallout contaminating the soil.
Shit.
Oops. Yep. Fallout is also the name of a popular series of video games that takes place in the aftermath of a nuclear war.
I immediately thought of that when I said that answer.
Yep. Fallout and Fallout 2, developed by Black Isle Studios, were open-world turn-based role-playing games, while Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, developed by Bethesda Softworks, are more action-oriented, but maintain the RPG elements and customization options of their predecessors. I have Fallout 4. It's fucking great.
Is that the game where you have the little dog?
Yes, Dog Meat.
That's a terrible name, but I'm sure it's cute.
He's a good boy.
Okay.
And lastly, something a bit more lighthearted, pop rock band Fall Out Boy are in fact named after Fall Out Boy, the sidekick of the fictional comic book superhero Radioactive Man from The Simpsons. The Radioactive Man movie was shot in Springfield, starring Rainier Wolfcastle in the title role, with local youth Milhouse Van Houten co-starring as Fall Out Boy.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that.
Yes, yeah, the name from Fall Out Boy, the band, comes from The Simpsons.
That's what I get for not watching enough of The Simpsons.
Indeed. Question 3. Sports and Games. Another episode from Season 1, the unusually lighthearted The Mighty Casey, focuses on a fictional National League baseball team called the Zephyrs, who play in what New Jersey city, which in reality never had a professional team of its own, but was the site of the first formally organized baseball game.
Jeez. I'm pretty sure that no city in New Jersey ever had a professional
I think that's
baseball
correct.
team.
Yep.
So that's not helpful. I might just go with the capital because it's simpler.
Okay.
Trenton?
Is that your answer?
Yes.
It is not Trenton.
Ah.
Now, it's Hoboken.
Hoboken.
Yeah, just south of New York.
Yeah, I figured, why would it be that close to New York? Because New York has 2 teams,
Well,
and they used to have more. So.
Prepare to find out why. It's actually a pretty interesting story.
Okay.
I don't like baseball.
I know.
It's slow.
Bye-bye
boring.
half of our listener base.
Yeah, right.
No, don't go.
It's slow and it's boring and the hot dogs are overpriced.
I like baseball games.
Yeah.
Is this Mighty Casey thing related to Casey at the Bat?
So not directly, but the title references Casey at the Bat. Very good.
I see.
You know who wrote Casey at
I've
the
never
Bat?
seen this episode. What?
You know who wrote Casey at the Bat?
No.
Ernest Thayer.
Oh, okay.
I learned that as I was researching this. That was originally part of the question, but it was too long and verbose, so I took it out.
see. I think I've read Casey at the Bat, but I've never seen this episode of the Twilight Zone.
I hadn't seen it until I was doing the research for this game, and I watched a few episodes.
Oh, now I want to binge watch the Twilight Zone.
It's on Netflix. We can watch after we're done recording.
We might.
All right. Anyway, I don't like baseball, but that said, as a trivia fan, I have to acknowledge the sport's unique place in American history and culture. So, I'm going to talk a bit about the very earliest history of baseball, from the earliest mentions of the sport to the first game ever played between 2 organized teams, which took place in good old Hoboken, New Jersey, to the end of the amateur era. The origins of America's pastime are unclear, but it probably descends from folk games played in Britain and continental Europe. The earliest known use of the word baseball in print comes from A Pretty Little Pocket Book, which is generally considered the first children's book. It contains a rhyme called baseball, but it is clear from the context that it actually refers to rounders, which is an older English game that was an ancestor of modern baseball.
Is it like cricket?
Cricket also descended from the same loose family of games that baseball did.
So they both sort of descended from this rounders game.
Rounders was older. Rounders was one of a variety of different folk games. The thing was back then, every game was played in a lot of different ways, and the same term was used for multiple games, and the same set of rules might be called by multiple names, and so it's all a bit murky. Rounders was, as far as I can tell, at least as I was reading about it, is the first one that had a clear, agreed-upon set of rules.
Okay.
But it was being referred to as baseball in A Pretty Little Pocket Book, even though it's not what we would call baseball now. So again, multiple terms for the same game.
A pretty little pocketbook.
Yes.
It sounds like an accessory for a little girl.
It does. It's a book. It's a literal book.
It seems like one of those books that like boys might be like, I don't know if I want to read this book.
Well, nowadays,
back in the
certainly,
day,
yeah.
Or maybe today, I don't know. Well, hopefully today we're a little past that. But who knows? Who knows?
There's a much repeated myth that Civil War General Abner Doubleday invented baseball in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York, which is now the site of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Doubleday had many noteworthy moments in his life, chief among them firing the first shot in defense of Fort Sumter, sparking the American Civil War.
Huh.
But he definitely didn't invent baseball.
Womp, womp.
The reality is there's probably no single inventor of baseball, but the earliest known published rules were written by a baseball club from New York City called the Knickerbockers. The rule that I found most interesting is the 13th, which banned soaking or plugging, which were terms that referred to sending a runner out of play by hitting him with a thrown ball.
Wow. Well, technically, players nowadays will, sometimes they'll get hit by a pitch so that they can get a walk.
No, this was a way of getting an out.
Oh, like you could just throw a ball at somebody.
Yeah, apparently in at least some early versions of baseball, you could get an out by just clocking a guy with a hard rubber missile.
Wow.
Yeah.
I once got a concussion from a softball, so I would imagine that a baseball would be slightly more dangerous.
Yes.
And then you'd have to have everybody wearing helmets.
And they didn't wear any protective gear back then.
No, I'm sure
Nothing.
they didn't. But just imagine baseball and they're all wearing helmets and then just like a fight breaks out because someone gets hit.
I think you're describing hockey.
Yeah, but like imagine if baseball was like hockey and they just would have a fight in the middle of the field.
It'd be a hell of a lot more interesting.
Yeah, possibly.
Anyway, you can see why they would do away with that and introduce the idea of tagging runners out.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Knickerbocker rules evolved into the modern rules, and the progression from 1845 to the present is fairly well documented. Notable differences: pitching back then was strictly underhanded. There were no balls, but strikes only counted if the batter swung, so basically there was no strike zone.
Oh,
and the game
that would be nice.
And the game was played to 21, not for a set number of innings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But like, if the game was played till 21 nowadays...
Oh, it would take days.
Yeah, it would take forever.
Yeah. I mean, back then, apparently, you could rack up runs more quickly, I suppose.
Interesting.
Again, underhanded pitching, no balls, but strikes only count if you swing, right? You probably had much higher batting averages back then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first game. On June 19th, 1846, the Knickerbockers played another pre-existing team, which is known to history only as the New York Nine, at the Elysian Fields in Hoboken.
Wait, were the Knickerbockers from New York or they were from Hoboken?
They were both made up of people from New York,
I see.
but they played at the Elysian Fields in Hoboken, which is basically a big open park.
I see.
The Knickerbockers had played there before, but this was the first game between two existing clubs with codified rules. 2 decades later, in 1865, the Elysian Fields hosted a championship match between the New York Mutuals and the Brooklyn Atlantics, which was attended by over 20,000 fans.
What was the name of the field?
The Elysian Fields.
How do you spell Elysian?
Elysian.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying Elysium for a while, and I was like, ooh, coming right back to the sci-fi stuff.
No, not the Matt Damon in an exosuit movie.
That was a weird movie. Anyway.
Baseball at the Elysian Fields declined with the construction of 2 fenced-in ballparks in Brooklyn. Why? Because the fences meant you could charge admission. So 20,000 fans attended this championship game in 1865, and nobody made any money off it. At this point, baseball was strictly amateur. Professional leagues didn't develop until the 1870s, but that's a story for another episode. I'll close with a weird fact connecting the past and present of baseball. Vintage baseball is still played by enthusiasts today who play competitive games with old-fashioned rules and uniforms. I can't decide if I think that's cool or not.
It's like a Civil War reenactment, but for baseball?
Yes.
That's cool.
Essentially. But it's a Civil War reenactment. You know who won the battle, so the outcome is basically scripted.
So it's less fun.
This is a competitive game played under old rules with old uniforms.
That seems more fun.
Than a Civil War reenactment?
Yeah.
Not to me, but okay.
To each their own.
Yes, indeed. All right. Question 4, Arts and Literature. The Season 5 episode, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, is unusual in that it was presented without commercial interruption and originated as an Academy Award-winning French short film. That short film was based on a short story by what author, who also wrote The Devil's Dictionary and vanished without a trace in 1913?
I don't have Is this like the Jeopardy music, but you're with the Twilight Zone music?
I don't know. It sounds
instead?
like the plot of a Twilight Zone episode, doesn't it?
This?
Yeah, it disappears without a trace.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I don't have a fucking clue, so I'm not even gonna try to guess.
Yeah, take a shot.
A Frenchman, probably. Well, maybe not. I don't know. The Devil. I've never heard of the Devil's Dictionary. An author that vanished. I'm gonna pass because I don't know any author that vanished without a trace.
Okay. Well,
this
the
is
answer.
Not going well.
The answer is Ambrose Bierce.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, you've probably heard the name. Ambrose Gwinnett Bierce was born in a log cabin on June 24th, 1842 in Meigs County, Ohio.
So he was not French.
He was not French at all.
On the wrong pathway anyway.
The short film was French. He was very not French.
I see.
He was the son of Marcus Aurelius Bierce and Laura Sherwood Bierce. Side note, Marcus Aurelius Bierce. Fuck yes, we're naming our firstborn son Marcus Aurelius.
Absolutely not. But doesn't that sound like a Roman... Was there a Roman guy named Marcus Aurelius?
Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote the Meditations.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I knew that sounded familiar.
We're naming our firstborn son Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Ambrose was the 10th of 13 children named, I shit you not, Abigail, Amelia, Anne, Addison, Aurelius, Augustus, Almeda, Andrew, Albert, Ambrose, Arthur, Adelia, and Aurelia.
Adelia?
Yes.
Adelia.
That's the one that crosses the line for you?
Actually, I think Ambrose is my favorite name of all of them.
I like Augustus, but...
I know you like Augustus because that was what you originally wanted to name our child.
Yes, well, I've moved on from that.
I guess Marcus is a little better.
I'm not really going to talk about his early life. There's not too much of note.
Okay.
When the Civil War broke out, he enlisted in the Union Army, serving as a topographical engineer, mapping out sites where battles were likely to occur. The most notable battle in which he personally participated was the Battle of Shiloh, which inspired several short stories and the memoir, What I Saw of Shiloh. After the war, he first rose to prominence as a writer by contributing to several newspapers and periodicals in San Francisco. In 1896, he was dispatched to Washington, D.C. He was assigned to cover the Railroad Refinancing Bill. Have you heard of this? I hadn't.
Nope.
No.
Not the best at history, so not a shocker.
I hadn't heard of this either. So basically, railroad companies have been lent huge amounts of money by the federal government to build the first transcontinental railroad at low interest rates. The loans totaled about $130 million, which would be about $3 billion today.
Damn.
Yeah, now that's a very specific fact that will never come up in a trivia setting, but holy shit.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the fact that we haven't heard of it.
I know, right? Well, this
probably because it hasn't come up in a trivia setting.
Well, yeah, true. Despite the favorable terms of the loans, however, the railroad companies somehow convinced Congress to consider a bill that would forgive the debt.
Wow.
They hoped to secretly pass the bill without any public hearings, but Bierce's passionate articles denouncing it so enraged the public that the bill was defeated. By the time Bierce moved to D.C. permanently in 1899, he was one of the most prominent writers on the West Coast.
So he was a writer on the West Coast.
He was dispatched to D.C. to cover this railroad refinancing bill for the West Coast newspapers, the San Francisco newspapers that he wrote for.
Did he move back to the West Coast?
So he was dispatched to D.C. in 1896. He wrote these stories on the railroad refinancing bill. He went back to San Francisco for a few years, and then he moved to D.C. permanently in 1899.
Okay.
Yeah. Bierce is best remembered today for his short stories. Many of them describe the horrors of war, including the aforementioned An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, also Killed at Resaca and Chickamauga. He was also a master of ghost stories. And the Devil's Dictionary, which I mentioned in the question, originated as a series of newspaper pieces that he called the Cynic's World Book. The dictionary consists of satirical definitions of English words, such as conservative, a statesman who is enamored of existing evils, as distinguished from a liberal who wishes to replace them with others.
That seems like a book you could write. You could write the Modern Devil's Dictionary.
Another one that I liked is egotist, a person of low taste, more interested in himself than in me.
Nice. I like it. I'd read that.
Critical reception was mixed at the time that it was released, but the Devil's Dictionary is now considered one of the most important works of American humor. In October of 1913, at the age of 71, Bierce left D.C. to tour Civil War battlefields. He somehow wound up entangled in the Mexican Revolution, joining Pancho Villa's army as an observer.
How?
It's unclear.
Okay.
A letter sent on December 26th indicates that Bierce traveled as far as Chihuahua in north-central Mexico. That letter is the last trace of Bierce. He seemingly just fell off the face of the earth after sending it.
Maybe he was kidnapped.
Well, his ultimate fate remains unknown to this day, despite multiple investigations. Most likely he died sometime in 1914, but we really have no idea what became of him. Bierce remains one of the most famous unsolved disappearances in American history, a literary Amelia Earhart, if you will.
Wow. It all comes back to Amelia Badelia. That was his sister's name, right?
Amelia Badelia?
Yeah, was that his sister's name?
No. No.
Amelia and Adelia.
He had sisters named Amelia and Adelia,
But
yes.
with those names, I wouldn't be shocked if Amelia's middle name was Badelia.
Amelia Badelia Bierce.
Yes,
Could
definitely.
be.
Sounds good.
Nothing I read said that she was the inspiration for the overly literal... What was she, like a nanny or something in those books? I don't know.
I think she was a maid.
Sure.
I loved those books.
Well, nothing I found as I was reading up for this question said that Ambrose Bierce's two sisters were the inspiration for them, but who's to say?
You never know. You never know.
Who's to say they weren't? Amelia Bedelia. Excellent.
You were saying something about another Amelia, I think, that made me think of this.
That was the end of the discussion. It was
Amelia Earhart.
Bierce remains one of the most famous unsolved disappearances in American history, a literary Amelia Earhart, if you will.
I see.
I almost said a literary Amelia
Amelia
Bedelia.
Bedelia. It was on everybody's mind with all those names.
Yeah. All right, question 5. Now, a question about the genius behind the Twilight Zone. Sorry, this is a geography question.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Although he was born in Syracuse, Rod Serling is buried in Interlaken, a village in what geographic region of New York State?
This is not going well. What geographic region of New York State?
Yes, the village is called Interlaken.
I want to say Long Island because that's where I'm from, and I don't think it's Long Island because the name sounds northern.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. Let's see. Maybe it's near Cornell. I'm going to say Finger Lakes.
It is the Finger Lakes.
Yes!
Very good.
Because I couldn't even think of the name of another region in New York, with a specific name. The Finger Lakes region.
Yes.
Yes.
So
I'm still only, what am I?
You're
less than 50%.
So you've gotten 2 out of 5 so far.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Better than I thought I'd do, so I'll take it.
The Finger Lakes are a group of long, narrow lakes in central New York that run roughly north to south. Do you know how many Finger Lakes there are?
I want to say 5 because there's 5 fingers on your hand, and maybe that's... No, it's probably just called that because of the shape. There's Seneca, Cayuga. I only know 2, let's face it. I don't know 5.
No, you'd think it would be 5. You'd want it to be 5 or maybe 10, but it's 11.
Some polydactyly going on there.
There's 11 Finger Lakes. That is just so deeply upsetting to me.
They should just call them the polydactyly lakes.
Not as catchy.
Except no one would know what they were talking about. Good word, though.
It is. Anyway, so the Finger Lakes formed over the past 2 million years as glaciers gouged and deepened older stream valleys. The 2 largest Finger Lakes, as you mentioned, are Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake, which are named for Iroquois tribes that traditionally inhabited the region. The Finger Lakes are notable for several places of historical or cultural significance. Many stops on the Underground Railroad were located in the region, and Harriet Tubman retired to a family home in Auburn, New York after the Civil War. The Finger Lakes are also the birthplace of the women's suffrage movement, which began in Seneca Falls,
Oh, yeah.
and the Mormon Church, which originated in Palmyra. Palmyra?
I don't know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's Palmyra.
I did
I'm
not
sure
know
though.
that was in New York where it originated.
Yeah,
I would say Palmyra.
I think it's Palmyra. Hemlock Lake is also where the state's oldest nesting bald eagle site is located. The site has contributed to a recovery of New York's bald eagle population.
Oh, that's cool.
And, as I mentioned, the village of Interlaken, population 602, is the final resting place of Rod Serling. His grandmother had a summer home there, which he later inherited, and the Serling family spent all their summers there, except for 2, which were around the birth of his 2 children. But every other summer, aside from when they just
Not around the time of
baby.
the Twilight Zone.
No, well, he was mostly a writer, so he would write while he was there.
Oh, okay.
Then he also taught at Antioch College in New York, and then he would fly out to LA to shoot the opening monologues. The Finger Lakes region is also the home of numerous colleges and universities, including, of course, our alma mater and the place where we first met, Cornell University.
Let's go Red!
Let's go Red! And also Ithaca College, the University of Rochester, and St. John Fisher College, among many others.
Is Rochester in the Finger Lakes area?
It's in the region, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was further west. North. I don't know. I thought it wasn't quite there. Anyway.
It's nearby.
And I think you have to mention their wine.
That's the next thing I was about to talk about.
Perfect.
And then there's the wine.
Yes.
The Finger Lakes is the largest wine-growing region in New York State, and it is particularly famous for the Riesling that is grown there. Riesling, of course, traditionally being a German grape, but it takes very well to the climate and the soil there.
Yep.
Central New York, as we both know, is brutally fucking cold in the winter, but the deep lakes trap heat during the summer, which is slowly let off during the winter, producing a fairly mild climate on the steep hillsides surrounding the lakes, which is where the grapes are grown. The first record of winemaking in the region dates to 1829, and today there are approximately 100 wineries in the area.
Wow. I think we need to go back because I've been to about 5 of them.
The Finger Lakes also sit on 2 large natural gas reserves. Hydrofracking technology has made the natural gas accessible for the first time, but many residents of the area opposed fracking due to concerns about groundwater contamination.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know a lot about fracking. I don't know what the science says about how safe or risky it is, and this is a geography discussion, not a science discussion anyway. But it's interesting that the first local legislation opposing fracking was passed in the Finger Lakes. Opposition spread, and in 2014, fracking was banned throughout New York State. And question 6, question the last. This is a history question. To close, a question about an episode of the 1985 Twilight Zone revival, which was remembered much less fondly than the 1959 original series. The episode in question, Ye Gods, sees a mortal man tangling with what 2 Roman deities played by Robert Morse and John Myers, one associated with love, the other with wine. Speaking of wine.
Yeah. First, let me say, I have not seen this episode, but I feel like I have to because it sounds fun.
Yeah, I didn't watch this one, actually.
Oh, maybe we should watch it.
I don't know if the 85 revival is... I mean, it must be somewhere. I'm sure we'll find it.
Oh, yeah, it's not the original.
No, so I wanted at least one question that wasn't about the original series.
Did Rod Serling write this revival?
No, he was gone. I think
he was dead.
I'm pretty sure he was dead.
Oh, shit. Okay.
He was certainly not involved in that. But
I should probably stop stalling because I'm not sure if I know the answer to this.
You can figure this one out.
Okay, so love and wine. I want to say Dionysus, but I think that's Greek. Cupid might be love.
Cupid is the love one.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's one.
Yes.
And then wine. I want to say like Venus or something, but I know it's not. Oh, man. Wine. It's not. Dionysus is the Greek one, right?
Yes.
Oh, damn it. Can I get like half points on this, like when we tally this up for like getting Cupid if I don't get the other one?
No.
Why? Why not?
Because you know this.
I do?
Yes.
Do I?
Yes.
I don't know.
The Roman equivalent of Dionysus.
I don't know. Is it a planet like the other Roman things?
No.
Shit, I don't know. It's
Okay.
not coming to me. Just tell me. I'm giving myself half points. I don't care.
No.
In my mind. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah, you should have gotten that.
Yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
Sorry. Half points for me.
No. So I know Bacchus and the other major Roman gods pretty well, and I think most trivia buffs do too.
I'm getting there.
But I didn't know a ton about Cupid, so that's what I dug into. Cupid isn't one of the Olympians, the 12 most important gods, so I never really learned much about him until now. Like most people, I mostly knew him as the bow and arrow toting naked baby on Valentine's Day cards.
Yep.
Cupid is the Roman equivalent of the god Eros, the Greek god Eros, excuse me. Cupid means desire in Latin, and he was sometimes also called Amor, meaning love. As is the case with most of these ancient gods, there are conflicting stories about his parentage, but the most common one is that he's the son of Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the goddess of love. Cupid mostly appears as a supporting character in stories about other mythological figures. There's really only one story of note that is about Cupid himself, and that is the love story of Cupid and Psyche. Buckle up, this gets weird.
Okay, so it's his own love story, not
Yes.
him making other people fall in love.
Yes,
So there's no actual story about Cupid making other people fall in love?
Oh, no, that's something that was definitely in the mythology. So
I
his
see.
magic arrows that cause you to fall in love, that's all part of the mythology, but it was always as a supporting character in a story about someone else. This is the only one where he's like a main character.
Is there like a direct Greek equivalent or not really?
Yes, Eros.
It is like a direct equivalent. Eros is a direct equivalent.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So Psyche, meaning soul or breath of life, was an exceptionally beautiful human princess. Venus, the goddess of love, became jealous of the attention that was showered on Psyche and sent her son Cupid to pierce Psyche with his arrow and cause her to fall in love with something hideous.
This is getting Oedipal.
Oh, just wait.
Oh, God.
Cupid accidentally scratched himself with his own arrow and fell in love with Psyche.
This is the story, he accidentally scratched himself.
With his own arrow.
Wow.
Which caused him to fall in love with Psyche.
Oh, boy.
He arranged for Zephyr, the west wind, to whisk her up to his palace in the sky.
Wasn't Zephyr just in another question?
Yes, the Hoboken Zephyrs.
Yeah,
from
maybe,
the Mighty Casey, yes.
Maybe Twilight Zone has something for, like, mythology.
I think so.
That probably must have been what it was from.
Yeah, definitely. So he had Zephyr, the west wind, bring her to his palace in the sky. In the dark of night, Cupid entered her bedroom and, quote, made her his wife, which is an odd way to phrase it, but I guess things worked a little differently back then.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. It is around this time in the story that I want to remind you that Cupid was usually portrayed, even back then, as a plump infant with wings.
So a plump infant with wings made
Psyche.
Made this hot princess his wife.
I told you this was going to be weird. Anyway, after making Psyche his wife, Cupid left before sunrise and ordered her never to look upon him. Psyche's sisters, jealous of her fancy new digs, convinced her to uncover the identity of her mysterious husband. While Cupid was sleeping, she lit a lantern and was so startled by his beauty that she wounded herself on an arrow in his quiver, which he had cast aside, and spilled hot wax from the lantern on him.
So he was like just a beautiful baby.
Yeah, evidently.
A beautiful plump baby.
In the representations in art of this that I found, he's more like a youth than a baby.
And how old is Psyche?
Well, I mean, it's never really clear. I mean, like in the depictions of him,
she's a pedophile.
In the depictions of him and Psyche, he's not a baby. He looks like a teenager almost, but he's usually portrayed as a baby.
I guess that's a little better.
I think it's much funnier to imagine him as a baby with a fully developed brain who flies around.
Yeah, and then she just looks at him and she's like, "Wow, he's so beautiful."
Yeah. So she's so startled by his beauty, she spills hot wax on him. He flees, wounded.
Kinky.
Oh, it was an accident, or so history tells us. And Psyche wandered the world to try to find him, having fallen in love with him due to having scratched herself on his arrow. So this is a recurring theme.
So everyone's just accidentally scratching themselves with Cupid's arrow.
Yes, that is the primary narrative device of this story.
Oh boy, okay.
She realized that she had to appease Venus, who set her to a series of difficult, seemingly suicidal tasks, the last of which involved descending into the underworld. Long story short, she did it. Cupid's wound healed, and he asked Jupiter for permission to properly marry Psyche. Jupiter agreed, on the condition that Cupid would help him out in the future whenever a young maiden caught his fancy. Naturally.
Of course.
So the agreement was, you can marry this princess, but next time I want to get some strange, you need to let me borrow your arrows, basically.
All right. Seems fair, I guess.
It was a long time ago. Jupiter gives Psyche a drink of ambrosia, making her immortal, and Cupid and Psyche marry as equals. And that, dear listeners, is the tale of Psyche and Cupid, the beautiful princess-turned-goddess and the naked flying baby who made her his wife.
Part of this does sound like the movie Hercules, because she has to go to the underworld to, like, do some task there, and then he makes her, like, a goddess in the end.
Okay.
And we all know that movie isn't based on actual Hercules.
Not at all.
It probably just comes from all different stories, so maybe part of it came from this.
Could be. Yep.
Possible.
All right.
My Disney fun facts.
Yeah, great. So that is the first ever game of Quiz and Hers. Your score is 2 points right now. I have 0
2.5.
2.
2.5.
2. We'll see
okay.
if I can make up some ground in the next game. So tune in next week for another episode of Quiz and Hers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Why do you say hello, internet? People don't listen to this on the internet.
It's a podcast. Where
They
do you
listen
get your
to it
podcast?
on their phone.
Yeah, through the internet.
Oh, okay.
Okay.